warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Tonight, we have new video that investigators say shows Sade Robinson's car driving away from Maxwell Anderson's home the night he killed her.
Now, this new video comes after more body parts were found today along Lake Michigan.
The video is timestamped at 12:47 a.m. in the early morning hours of April 2nd, roughly 3 hours after Anderson and Robinson arrived at his home.
April 2, 2024. A jogger's morning routine along the shores of Lake Michigan at Warnemont Park in Cudahy, Wisconsin, comes to an abrupt, horrifying halt. There, partially buried in the sand, is a human leg, severed at the hip, the toenails still perfectly painted pink. This discovery would be just the first piece of a macabre puzzle, one that began less than 24 hours earlier, when 19-year-old Sade Robinson stepped out for what should have been an ordinary first date. What started as a hopeful evening for this bright college student ended as one of Wisconsin's most horrific murder cases in recent memory. Her dismembered body scattered across Milwaukee County like discarded trash. In surveillance footage from that night, we see Sade sitting at a bar beside 33-year-old Maxwell Anderson. She's smiling, laughing even, completely unaware that the man beside her would become her alleged killer before the night was through. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. Spring of 2024, as America emerged from another Midwestern winter, Milwaukee's dating scene was buzzing with the same energy seen across the country. Dating apps had become not just normalized but expected, transforming how young people connected. Gone were the days when meeting someone meant introductions through friends or chance encounters at local hangouts. Now, profiles were swiped, messages exchanged, and dates arranged with strangers in a matter of minutes. For 19-year-old Sade Robinson, like millions of other young women in America, this digital landscape was simply the reality of modern dating, convenient yet fraught with invisible risks. Amid finishing her criminal justice degree at Milwaukee Area Technical College, working shifts at a local pizza restaurant, and balancing family responsibilities, finding connection meant navigating these waters with caution but hope. April in Milwaukee remains unforgiving, the promise of spring constantly undermined by frigid gusts sweeping off Lake Michigan. The massive freshwater sea that borders the city isn't just scenery. With water temperatures still hovering around 40 degrees, it's a powerful, deadly force. Its currents cold enough to kill within minutes, its depths capable of concealing secrets indefinitely. The vibrant college corridors where Sade walked daily stood in sharp contrast to the undercurrent of violence that occasionally erupted in the city. Milwaukee's homicide rate had been concerning residents, with young women of color disproportionately affected by violent crime, a statistic that rarely made national headlines but was painfully real to local communities. When Sade agreed to meet Maxwell Anderson at a seafood restaurant on April 1st, she followed the cardinal rule of modern dating: meet in public. This standard precaution gives a sense of control, of safety. The restaurant setting, with witnesses all around, should have been the testing ground, the safe space to determine whether to proceed further. But what Sade couldn't know was that the public first meeting was merely the opening act in a calculated performance designed to gain her trust just long enough to lure her away from safety. Sade Carlina Robinson came into this world on May 10, 2004. Born in Mississippi, she would carry the warmth and resilience of her southern roots throughout her life, even after her family relocated to Milwaukee in search of broader educational opportunities and a fresh start. In Milwaukee, Sade built a life centered around family, particularly her close bond with her mother, Sheena Scarborough, and younger sister, Adriana Ream. Like many siblings, their relationship evolved over time. Adriana would later recall how they fought as young siblings do, their childhood marked by the typical squabbles that often disguise deeper connections. But as they matured, that foundation transformed into something profound and nurturing. Anyone who knew us knew that she was the person who you wanted to talk to, Adriana would tell mourners a year after her sister's death, her voice breaking with emotion. She could put a smile on anyone's face. Despite her youth, Sade stepped naturally into a caretaker role within the family. Even with her demanding schedule of work and studies, she would make time to cook meals for her younger sister. This wasn't occasional help. It was a consistent act of love and responsibility that spoke volumes about her character. By early 2024, Sade had built an impressive life for someone just approaching her 20th birthday. She was mere weeks away from graduating from Milwaukee Area Technical College with an associate's degree in criminal justice, a field she had chosen with purpose and passion. Friends would later say she spoke often about wanting to help others and make a difference in her community. The path hadn't been easy. To put herself through school, Shadeai worked at Pizza Shuttle, a popular restaurant on Milwaukee's east side. There, she wasn't just another employee, she was a presence that left an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. Very outgoing, she would talk to everybody here. She was always there to lighten the mood, recalled Justin Romano, one of the managers at Pizza Shuttle. Her colleagues described an energy that transformed the workplace, someone whose absence would be immediately felt. But perhaps nothing captured Sade's essence quite like her laugh, described by those who loved her as iconic and unmatchable. It was the kind of genuine expression that pulled others into its orbit, infectious and wholly authentic. Behind that laugh was a young woman of remarkable discipline. While many her age struggled with the competing demands of work and education, Sade managed both with a maturity beyond her years. She wasn't just attending classes, she was excelling, positioning herself for a meaningful career in criminal justice. A cruel irony, given how her story would unfold. When she vanished on April 2, 2024, Sade Robinson wasn't just a name or a statistic. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a student weeks from graduation, and a young woman whose determination had earned her a future full of promise. A future that was violently stolen from her on what should have been just another ordinary spring day. While Sade Robinson was building a life of purpose and promise, Maxwell Anderson was crafting something entirely different, a carefully constructed facade concealing a deeply disturbing reality. At 33 years old, Anderson was no impulsive youth. The Milwaukee resident had lived enough life to make choices, establish patterns, and reveal his true character through his actions. And those actions spoke volumes about the man behind the mask. Court records revealed a troubling history that should have served as a warning. Anderson's past included charges of domestic abuse, violence directed at those closest to him. Multiple drunk driving incidents demonstrated a pattern of reckless disregard for others' safety. Disorderly conduct charges punctuated his record. Public displays of aggression that hinted at deeper, darker impulses barely contained beneath the surface. Yet somehow he managed to navigate society, holding jobs and presenting a functional exterior to the world. At the time he met Sade, Anderson had previously worked at the very seafood restaurant where they would have their fateful first date, a place where he knew the layout, the staff, perhaps even how to appear comfortable and trustworthy in that environment. The 14-year age gap between them, Anderson at 33, Sade just 19, represented more than just numbers. It embodied a vast gulf in life experience, in power dynamics, in vulnerability. While Sade was still finding her footing in early adulthood, Anderson had spent years developing the skills to identify, isolate, and exploit the trust of others. What investigators would later discover about Anderson's home sent shockwaves through the community. Law enforcement reports described blood on the walls, the physical evidence of violence that had transpired within those private spaces. Even more disturbing, media reports indicated officers discovered what was described as a sex dungeon in the basement, a space that suggested premeditation, preparation, and purpose far beyond the spontaneous encounter Anderson would likely claim. The stark contrast between how Anderson presented himself to the outside world and the reality of his private life represents a chilling reminder of how predators operate in plain sight. To casual observers, to neighbors, perhaps even to Sade during those early hours of their date, he may have appeared normal, even charming. This carefully crafted exterior served as camouflage, allowing him to move through society undetected. Most disturbingly, what investigators pieced together in the aftermath of Sade's murder wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. The evidence pointed to something far more calculated: the timing of their movements, from public to private spaces, the disposal of remains across multiple locations, the burning of her vehicle to destroy evidence. Each element suggested planning, foresight, and a methodical approach to both the crime itself and the attempted concealment of it, revealing a predator who had perhaps been preparing for this moment long before Sade Robinson ever crossed his path. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. April 1, 2024. A Monday that began like any other for Sade Robinson, but would end in unimaginable horror. That morning, Sade's enthusiasm for her upcoming date was evident to everyone around her. An employee in her apartment building would later tell investigators that Sade had specifically mentioned how excited she was about meeting Maxwell Anderson that evening. This wasn't just casual interest. She was genuinely looking forward to the connection, the possibility. She texted Anderson directly about her dining preferences, feeling seafood, a simple message that would inadvertently seal her fate by leading her to the restaurant where Anderson had once worked, a place where he would have the home field advantage of familiarity. With the care and consideration typical of a 19-year-old preparing for a promising date, Shadeai chose her outfit deliberately. Ripped jeans paired with a white shirt. We know this specific detail not from friend recollections or social media posts, but from the grim reality that these same clothes would later be identified among the burned remnants in her car. As the day progressed, Sade went about her normal routine, attending classes, perhaps finishing assignments, unaware that her movements were simply the prelude to tragedy. Each mundane decision, each ordinary action of April 1st, was carrying her inexorably toward a predator's orbit. By early evening, she arrived at the seafood restaurant where Anderson was waiting. Surveillance cameras captured them sitting together at the bar, imagery that would later become crucial evidence, but in the moment was nothing more than two people getting acquainted. To other patrons, to the staff, there was nothing remarkable about the scene, just another first date unfolding in a public place, exactly as dating safety guidelines recommend. Their conversation flowed, and Anderson apparently suggested continuing the evening. According to phone location data later recovered by investigators, the pair moved from the restaurant to a nearby sports bar, another public venue, another seemingly safe decision that maintained the appearance of a normal date progression. What happened next represents the critical turning point in Sade's story. At some point during the evening, Anderson suggested they go to his home. This moment, this decision, was the invisible threshold between safety and mortal danger. We'll never know what convinced Sade to cross it. Perhaps Anderson had spent hours building trust, presenting himself as harmless and genuine. Perhaps he offered some innocent-sounding reason to briefly stop by his place. Whatever persuasive tactics he employed, they worked. The tracking data from Sade's phone, later discovered through a location-sharing app by her concerned mother and friend, reveals the fatal journey, from the restaurant to the sports bar and then to Anderson's residence, each ping of her phone location marking another step toward the unthinkable. What makes this case so terrifying is the ordinary nature of how the evening began. There were no obvious red flags visible to outsiders, no dramatic scenes in public, no documented distress calls. Just a normal-seeming date that progressed through the typical stages, from a restaurant to another venue to a private location, a pattern repeated thousands of times every weekend across America. Except this time, one participant was methodically leading the other toward a horrific end. As Sade entered Anderson's home, The last thin thread of safety was severed. She was now isolated with a predator, away from the protective gaze of surveillance cameras and witnesses, beyond the reach of easy help. The mundane beginning of their evening together had disguised the nightmare that was about to unfold behind closed doors. The morning of April 2nd arrived with a conspicuous absence at Pizza Shuttle. Sade Robinson hadn't shown up for her shift, an immediate red flag to those who knew her dependable nature. "We kind of knew something was up. We had been calling her all day," Justin Romano, the manager on duty, would later tell local media. His voice carried the weight of retrospective dread as he added, "This wasn't like her at all." By nightfall, with no word from Sade and all calls going unanswered, one of her friends made the call to Milwaukee police. The alarming pattern, missed work, no communication, complete silence on social media, wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented for the responsible young woman. Officers responded with a welfare check at Sade's apartment, but found no trace of her there, no signs of disturbance, no indications of her current whereabouts, just the unsettling emptiness of a home whose occupant had vanished. But even as police were beginning their initial inquiries, evidence of something horrific was already surfacing across the city. That very morning, authorities had responded to reports of a vehicle fire. What they discovered was Sade's 2020 Honda Civic engulfed in flames. The criminal complaint would later describe extreme fire damage, completely damaging the interior. A deliberate attempt to destroy evidence through fire's purifying destruction. Despite the extensive damage, investigators would later recover fragments of physical evidence from the vehicle, remnants of the white shirt and ripped jeans Shadeai had worn on her date, along with pieces of what appeared to be her iPhone. Each charred fragment was another breadcrumb on the trail of horror that was just beginning to emerge. Then came the discovery that would transform a missing person case into something far more sinister. Later that same day, at Warnemont Park in Cudahy, a Milwaukee suburb along Lake Michigan's shore, a pedestrian made a gruesome find. A human leg had washed up on the beach. The limb appeared to have been sawn off at the hip, according to the criminal complaint, suggesting not a traumatic accident, but a deliberate dismemberment. Preliminary examination determined the leg belonged to a black woman approximately 5 feet tall, matching Shadeai's description. The grim reality began to take shape even before preliminary DNA testing confirmed what many already feared. The remains belonged to Sade Robinson. For investigators, for Sade's family, for the entire community, the horrifying truth was becoming impossible to deny. The vibrant young woman who had set out for a first date just over 24 hours earlier hadn't simply gone missing. She had been killed, her body deliberately dismembered, the evidence methodically scattered to conceal the crime. The emerging pattern pointed to something beyond a momentary act of violence. This was premeditated evil. The killer had taken calculated steps, dismembering the body to complicate identification, burning the vehicle to destroy evidence, disposing of remains across multiple locations to hinder recovery efforts. Each action revealing not just brutality, but a cold, tactical approach to concealment. As the sun set on April 2nd, Milwaukee faced the dawning realization that a predator had walked among them, had selected a victim, had executed a plan with meticulous cruelty, and might still be free, potentially searching for another target. As Milwaukee reeled from the horror of Sade's dismembered remains washing ashore, investigators were already piecing together the digital record of her final hours, an electronic ghost trail that would lead them directly to her killer. In a twist of tragic irony, it was Sade's own careful safety precautions that would help solve her murder. Her mother, Sheena Scarborough, and a concerned friend accessed a location-sharing app on her phone, a digital breadcrumb trail revealing Sade's movements on April 1st. The data painted a clear picture, from the seafood restaurant to a nearby sports bar, then to Maxwell Anderson's residence in northwest Milwaukee, and finally to Warnemont Park, the very location where her leg would be discovered. The phone's journey ended at the park, around 3 a.m. on April 2nd, a digital timestamp marking the approximate moment her killer disposed of her remains in Lake Michigan's frigid waters. With these electronic markers establishing a timeline and a suspect, police moved quickly. But even as the investigation accelerated, Lake Michigan continued to yield its grim evidence. On April 6th, as officers canvassed the area where Sade's burned car had been discovered, they found more human remains, a foot, and what was described in the criminal complaint as what appeared to be human flesh. Forensic examination confirmed what was already feared. These two belonged to Sade Robinson. The search for her remained unrelenting. On April 18th, a civilian walking along a remote tree-lined stretch of South Milwaukee Beach made another horrific discovery. A human torso and an arm had washed ashore. The Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office confirmed these remains were also believed to be Shadeai's. The lake wasn't finished revealing its secrets. Nearly a month later, on May 16th, a human arm was discovered along the shoreline at Waukegan Municipal Beach in Illinois, some 50 miles south of Milwaukee. Though definitive identification proved challenging, authorities investigated whether this too was part of Sade's remains carried south by Lake Michigan's powerful currents. Meanwhile, evidence against Maxwell Anderson was mounting rapidly. A search of his home revealed blood on the walls, the silent testimony of violence that had occurred there. The discovery of several gasoline containers corroborated the theory that he had deliberately burned Sade's car to destroy evidence. Most disturbing were media reports indicating officers had found what was described as a sex dungeon in Anderson's basement, a space suggesting premeditation and predatory intent that extended beyond a single victim. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. On April 4th, just 2 days after Sade was reported missing, police arrested Maxwell Anderson. Though initially held on suspicion while the investigation continued, formal charges would follow on April 12th: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson of property other than a building. The charging document didn't mince words about the calculated nature of the crime. The facts mentioned in this complaint caused complainant to conclude that the defendant intentionally killed and then dismembered Robinson with the intent to conceal the homicide, and it occurred between the arrival at the defendant's residence and his departure from the Warnament Park area. In just 10 days, investigators had moved from the discovery of unidentified human remains to charging a suspect with one of the most heinous murders in recent Milwaukee history, a testament to both modern investigative techniques and the killer's inability to fully cover his tracks, despite his methodical efforts to conceal evidence. As Anderson faced the justice system, the community confronted a chilling truth. The monster responsible for Sade's dismemberment had been hiding in plain sight all along. While the justice system began its methodical proceedings against Maxwell Anderson, the shockwaves of Sade's murder rippled outward, first devastating her family, then mobilizing an entire community determined that her death would not be in vain. For Sheena Scarborough, Sade's mother, the loss was incomprehensible. At a memorial event marking 1 year since her daughter's disappearance, Scarborough stood before supporters, her grief still raw. "I miss you so much, baby girl," she said, her voice breaking as she alternated between tears and firm resolve. The words, simple yet profound, captured the permanent wound left by her daughter's absence. Adriana Reams, Sade's younger sister, shared memories that humanized the young woman who had become a headline. "She could put a smile on anyone's face," Adriana recalled. Her laugh was iconic for one, and unmatchable. She spoke of their evolving relationship, from childhood squabbles to the deep bond they formed as they matured, and how Sade would cook for her despite her hectic schedule, demonstrating love through everyday acts of care. The community's response was immediate and powerful. Several dozen members gathered for what they called a pink-out event, transforming Maxwell Anderson's front lawn into a makeshift memorial adorned with Sade's favorite color. Pink balloons, flowers, stuffed animals, and posters created a visual testament that reclaimed the space associated with her killer as a place to honor her memory instead. Similar memorials appeared at Pizza Shuttle, where Sade had worked. Co-workers and customers, many who had never met her but felt connected to her story, left tokens of remembrance and grief. Pink ribbons and flowers accumulated, each item a small stand against the darkness of what had happened. In the courtroom, Milwaukee prosecutors didn't mince words about the extraordinary brutality of the crime. The assistant district attorney described the killing and dismemberment of Robinson as the highest level of violence imaginable, a rare official acknowledgement of the extreme depravity involved. Perhaps most surprising was the statement issued by Stephen Anderson, the father of the accused killer. On April 18, 2024, as news broke of additional remains being discovered, he released a message through his son's attorneys. On behalf of myself and my family, I would like to express our deepest sympathy and heartfelt condolences to the family and loved ones of Sade Robinson. We are shocked and devastated by her senseless death. To Sade's parents, he added, "Words cannot express our sorrow for the incomprehensible pain and grief you are going through." The community's commitment to honoring Sade continued months after her death. In September 2024, a vibrant mural of Sade Robinson was painted near the entrance of Pizza Shuttle, ensuring that her face, her smile, would remain a daily presence in the place where she had brought so much joy to others. But perhaps the most significant legacy emerged from her mother's determination to transform grief into action. Sheena Scarborough established Sade's Voice Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting missing persons and crime victims, with special focus on Black, brown, and Indigenous women and girls who disappear at disproportionate rates, yet receive less media attention and fewer resources. "This is a pandemic that needs to be addressed," Scarborough declared, channeling her personal anguish into advocacy. She began working with state legislators to create a task force dedicated to gathering statistics on missing women of color and addressing the systemic inequities in how these cases are handled. Through each memorial, each statement, each new initiative, a powerful message emerged. Sade Robinson would be remembered not just for how she died, but for who she was and the change her story could create. As the community rallied around Sade's memory, the machinery of justice ground forward with excruciating slowness for those left behind. In the sterile environment of Milwaukee County Criminal Court, Maxwell Anderson made his first appearances, a stark contrast to the vibrant young woman whose life he was accused of taking. Anderson entered a not guilty plea to all charges: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, the court, recognizing both the severity of the crimes and the potential flight risk, set bail at an extraordinary $5 million, ensuring he would remain behind bars while awaiting trial. By September 2024, Anderson's defense team had begun strategic maneuvers, filing a motion to sever the charges, essentially requesting separate trials for the homicide and the arson of Sade's vehicle. Their argument hinged on portraying the car burning as a separate crime, disconnected from the murder itself. In a critical September 13th hearing, Judge Laura Crivello rejected this attempt, ruling that all charges would be tried together. Her decision was unequivocal. All of the evidence related to the arson is relevant to establishing motive. The motive to get away from the homicide and cause the mutilation. The judge's reasoning extended beyond legal technicalities to consider the human cost of prolonged proceedings. It would be difficult, devastating, I would say, to have to be at two different trials, Crivello stated. Severance of the charges in this case would serve to prolong the proceedings and would be contrary to the interests and rights of the victims. With this ruling, the path seemed clear for the December 9, 2024 trial date. Sade's family clung to this timeline, desperately needing closure as the first anniversary of her death approached. But their hopes were shattered when, in early December, the defense filed a motion to adjourn, claiming they needed more time to analyze evidence from Anderson's phone. Despite prosecutors stating they were prepared to proceed, Judge Crivello granted the delay, setting a new trial date of May 27, 2025, pushing justice more than a full year after the murder. For Sheena Scarborough, this delay was another wound inflicted by the system through her attorney. She released a blistering statement that captured her anguish and frustration. Computerized records in a digital age were created for the speed and transfer of information. So why was the information not requested when this case first started? Why were experts not retained and issues not discussed until November, when the entire world knew that one of the ways he was connected to this case was his cell phone? I know we are not supposed to judge until you are proven to be guilty, but I am angry, and he did not wait to murder my daughter, and I should not have to wait for justice. The raw emotion in her words resonated beyond the courtroom, highlighting how procedural delays in the legal system inflict their own form of suffering on victims' families, forcing them to put grief on hold while they wait for resolution that constantly seems to recede into the distance. As of early 2025, the case remains in this legal limbo. Court hearings continue, with each brief status update confirming the trial remains on track for May, but offering little substantive progress. For the Robinson family, each passing day is another without closure, another with the knowledge that while they struggle with their loss, the legal system moves at its own deliberate pace, indifferent to their pain. Sade Robinson's story, while uniquely heartbreaking, exists within a broader pattern that demands our attention. Across America, Black women and girls go missing at rates that should trigger national alarm, yet their disappearances often receive a fraction of the media coverage and investigative resources devoted to similar cases involving white women. The statistics are sobering. Between 2016 and 2022, Black women represented 40% of domestic violence homicides in Milwaukee County alone, a stark overrepresentation compared to their percentage of the population. Nationwide, the pattern persists. While Black girls make up about 15% of the female population under 18, they account for nearly 40% of missing girls in many jurisdictions, as Sheena Scabra stated with unflinching clarity at the memorial event marking 1 year since her daughter's death. This is a pandemic that needs to be addressed. Her words weren't mere rhetoric, but a call to action that she herself has answered. Through establishing Shadeai's Voice Foundation and advocating alongside state legislators, Scarborough has channeled her grief into creating a task force dedicated to gathering statistics on missing women of color and addressing the systemic inequities in how these cases are handled. In April 2025, nearly 100 people gathered at Warnemont Park, the very location where the first of Sade's remains were discovered, for what they called an angelversary. Against the backdrop of Lake Michigan, the same waters that had carried her remains to shore now witnessed a community united in remembrance and resolve. At this memorial, Sade's uncle David Scarborough II, known as Lil Dave the Poet, delivered a poem that captured both the enduring pain of her absence and the determination to ensure her legacy. As attendees prepared to release pink balloons into the sky, he recited, "As we release these colors high, may they dance upon the sky, carrying our hopes and dreams. We'll remember you forevermore and cherish the love we shared before. Until we meet again and play our part, we fly these balloons through the pain." Sade Carlina Robinson is her name. The pink balloons soared upward, quickly swept away by the winds off Lake Michigan, a visual metaphor for how swiftly Sade's life had been taken, yet how her memory continued to travel onward, touching lives far beyond her own brief 19 years. What happened to Sade Robinson represents the darkest possibilities of human cruelty. But what has happened since, the community response, her mother's advocacy, the continued pressure for justice, represents humanity's capacity for resilience, compassion, and the pursuit of meaningful change born from tragedy. As Maxwell Anderson's trial date approaches, the Robinson family continues their agonizing wait. But through the foundation bearing Shadeai's name, through the mural that keeps her face visible in the community, through each conversation sparked by her story about the safety of young women and the particular vulnerabilities faced by women of color, Shadeai's influence continues. Attorney Verona Swanigan, representing Shadeai's mother, perhaps captured it best in her statement following yet another trial delay. "Justice may be delayed, but it will continue to be sought." For Sade Robinson, for the young woman with the unmatchable laugh who cooked for her sister despite her busy schedule, who was weeks away from a criminal justice degree, who left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. We can only hope that this promise holds true. If you enjoyed this content, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.